All right, so we're a couple minutes after the starting time of 1 o'clock, so I think we'll get started with a little information about WARP for those of you who aren't familiar with our organization. Do you want to share the WARP's homepage?
Sure, I'll do that, Judy. So
Thanks.
here is WARP's website. It's weavearealpeace.org. And I just want to share a little bit about us for those who are not familiar with WARP, or if this is your first program joining us. We are an international textile networking organization. This program today is one of our monthly programs. This panel discussion is free and open to all, and we have it every month on a different topic. And we also have members only monthly programs. So I just want to share here that under events from our homepage, you can view all upcoming events and register from this tab. You also can view the recordings of all of our previous events here. And then if you want more information about the annual meeting that we were just discussing, that is also here under the events tab. And then just a couple of highlights here on the homepage I want to share. Here's the sort of preview of the annual meeting. So you also can view the full program right here from the homepage, all of the speakers that we have lined up. And then also just for 2 weeks, we have this really fun fundraiser going on. So we have a dozen bundles of wonderful textiles from all different parts of the world that were donated by WARP board members and members at large. And tickets are just $5. So I encourage you to check this out. You can read all about the different textiles and also purchase a $5 ticket if you wish. And so with that, I'll stop screen sharing and turn it back over to Judy.
All righty. All right, let's get ready for DIMA, which is the subject of today's program. DIMA is a nonprofit vocational training school that's located in Niger. I stopped for a minute and said Niger because it's next to Nigeria. So I was a little confused when I first was trying to figure out where we were going today, but our speakers are going to explain that. They have great maps and instructions. So I'm just giving you a little preview. We are going to Africa today, ladies and gentlemen. DIMA offers programs in weaving, in tailoring, and leatherworking. And there's no charge at all for the training, thanks to wonderful donors. They started with 15 students in 2017, and now they have 100 students enrolled. So this has been a wonderful story of growth, and WARP is part of that support for the growth and gave DIMA a development grant this year. So Judith, who's going to be our primary speaker, is going to share how they're going to use the grant funding. Judith Sen's career was in marketing, business development, and management consulting, and she spends her time now volunteering for DIMA and doing textile design. Sumama is the president and founder of DIMA and a master leather worker who was born and raised in Niger, who now resides in the US. So it was his lifelong dream to start DIMA, and how fabulous that in 2017 he made his dream a reality. Our third speaker is Genevieve Hill-Thomas, who attended Indiana University, where she got a PhD in the history of art. She teaches at the Ringling College of Art and Design, and earlier this year made a trip to Niger to teach students at DIMA how to use the floor loom. So you're going to learn all about this and more in today's program. And I'm pleased to present Judith Sen with Genevieve as the technical support and Sumama as called upon to give his perspective. Please join me in welcoming Judith and the team from DIMA.
Thank you, Judy and Kelsey. We're really happy to be here today. And as Judy said, we're here to talk about our school in Niger. And if I got next slide. Sumana and I met 13 years ago when I lived in central Pennsylvania. Sumana is from Niger, and next slide. You can see Niger is a West African country. And next, please. This is a little bit closer. About 80% of the country is in the Sahara Desert. Most of the population is in the south. The third largest river in Africa runs through the country. It starts up in Sierra Leone, goes through Mali, goes down into Niger, and then, as you can see in the south, it's bordered on the south by Nigeria. Both Niger and Nigeria are named after the river. The capital is Niamey, which is over in the southwest. And if you look, there's a road, major road going up into Mali, Tillaberi. And just north of Tillaberi is a small village called Kirigkena. And that's where we're going to use our warp money. We're going this summer to start to establish a weaving center there. So we'll talk a little bit later about the weaving that's going on in Niamey and our work with weavers. Next slide, please. Okay, a little bit of facts and figures on Niger. The boundary of the country was drawn by the French in the 1930s. The French army invaded Niger in 1898, and the people fought back. So it took the French until about 1922 to repress the population enough that they declared it a colony. And then they carved out this country from borders of other political areas, 4 large ethnic groups, the North, the East, West, and the South. And so that's kind of reflected actually in DIMA today, in that we use 4 languages in the school. We teach in Zarma and Hausa, 2 of the major groups. Then we do business in French. French is the official language of the country. And we also use English. Today, there are about 25 million people in the country. Half of them are under 15. 45% of them live on less than $1.90 a day. 80% are subsistence farmers. There's about a 30% literacy rate, and only about 20% of eligible young people enter high school. The United Nations rates the country as the least developed country in the world. But there is another side to this story, because there's evidence that Niger has been inhabited by people for at least 300,000 years. It's an area that has seen kingdoms and sultanates and empires. And with empires, it has seen books and literature, universities, scientists, mathematicians, theologians, artists. And when there is empire, there are the arts. So for example, the main thing we're going to talk about today is weaving. And this is an example of Nigerian weaving. And Sumana and Genevieve will go into that in more detail. Next slide, please. Another craft that's been around for thousands of years is leatherwork. And here is Sumana with his booth. He is a master leather worker. When we met, we decided to set up a little leatherworking business. I like surface design. He does the leather work. And next slide, we worked together a couple years making things. At that point, about 10 years ago, I decided to move to the West Coast. And when I got here, I met a lot of nice weavers and decided to join them. So I started taking classes at a weaving center. And Sumana came to visit me in 2015. At that point, he had just gotten a license from the Nigerian government to start a vocational training school. And I needed a little help. He came, and next slide, please. He went with me. This is the weaving school near where I live with a couple of my friends. And he was helping me to dress a loom for a project. But he walked into the weaving studio. He saw all the looms, and he said, wow, I need something like this for the school that I'm setting up. Okay, Sumana, I'm going to turn it over to you and let you tell people what happened next.
Hello, everybody. And then 2015, I started school. You can see background there. I was there in, I don't know, with heart, with a lot of group for the member for the DIMA. Next. And then 3 years later, you can see the young people have graduation. They have their 33 kids. They have 36 kids. They graduate there. So next, you can see, and then the next student coming in, you can see is atelier for the leather for the tailoring. They have 30 kids there. 27 the girls, to three the boys. Next, you can see here the leather worker also. They have a you can see here they very mixed the weaving and the leather to make clothes. That's why is there. You can see also because Niger people marry very young age. You can see somebody taking out behind his mom's back there. So he enjoys the time the mom's working. Next. Here you can see the leather work, traditional leather worker here. In the corner right there, if you can see the corner, we have volume in the corner by people for watching on stage. Village friend give us donation right there in the corner. So it take us like 4 years to get somebody get there to train people. Well, finally, good luck. We find Genevieve go to Niger to teach the master weaver how to use it because they don't know how to use this kind of loom. So next, you can see that's the first day for the student to learn how to weave the traditional loom. So they have to go each by one by one to show them. That's why you see everybody come to stare, to watch. This is how they do it. Next, you can see one student start there for the first day to spend time with the loom. Next. So here the video can tell us the whole what's going on in the DIMA.
Un peuple qui ne connaît pas son passé, ses origines et sa culture ressemble à un arbre sans racines, disait l'homme politique américain Marcus Garvey. Et c'est dans ce fuseau de préservation et de promotion de la culture nigérienne, notamment l'artisanat, que s'est inscrit l'ONG Dispositif d'initiative pour les métiers de l'artisanat DIMA, avec comme objectif de mettre au travail les. On veut que cette jeunesse soit formée. On veut vraiment cette jeunesse soit informée pour que l'art nigérien doit Pour ce faire, l'ONG DIMA recrute des jeunes, des couches défavorisées et vulnérables pour les former dans les métiers de la maroquinerie, la couture et le tissage. Comme cheval de bataille de l'ONG DIMA, la valorisation de la culture nigérienne, d'où l'accent mis sur la formation des jeunes tisserands en vue de maintenir allumée la flamme de ce métier en voie de disparition, faute de relève. Des tenues traditionnelles confectionnées par l'ONG DIMA qui constituent un pan important de l'identité culturelle nigérienne. Un des députés a rendu visite à l'ONG pour tâter du doigt le travail remarquable abattu par celle-ci en matière de promotion de l'identité culturelle du Niger.
Je pense qu'aujourd'hui, il est extrêmement important que nous ayons des produits avec notre label. Ceci est extrêmement important et il est aussi important que sur le plan culturel, les activités ou en tout cas des travaux de pratique que nous avons perdu de vue depuis belle lurette, que ces pratiques-là ressurgissent à travers une telle démarche.
Et par arrêté numéro 651 du 21 septembre 2015, l'ONG DIMA, qui a déjà mis sur le marché de l'emploi sa première promotion, ambitionne de couvrir l'ensemble du pays pour aider la jeunesse nigérienne à l'apprentissage des métiers de l'artisanat en vue d'être des ambassadeurs par excellence de la culture nigérienne, car une communauté sans culture est un peuple sans être humain, déclarait l'ancien président sénégalais Léopold Sédar Senghor. Et voilà tout le sens du combat de l'ONG DIMA pour la valorisation des tenues traditionnelles et de l'artisanat nigérien au Niger et dans le monde.
All right, I think I'm going next after this video. So, hi everybody. So I got involved with DIMA just under a year ago. In August, I had a colleague, Amanda Gilvin, reach out to me and ask me, do you know where we can purchase thread in Burkina Faso? And one of the reasons why she asked me that is I have a background of researching in Burkina Faso, and the textile that I research primarily is something called Faso Dan Fani. So this is what I'm going to start with. And I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview of some of the textiles in West Africa so that we can contextualize the textiles that are being produced at DIMA. Now, Faso Dan Fani is a Jula term, which roughly translates to handmade cloth of the country. It's a regional cloth. You can see that it's warp-faced, there are stripes, and it's dyed in indigo. And about 13 years, I had a Fulbright, or 13 years ago, sorry, I had a Fulbright to go and study for about a year in Burkina Faso. And I studied these textiles in the market, but I also love weaving. So I also learned how to weave Faso Dan Fani. And it was an amazing experience working with weavers day in and day out. And it's something that never really left my personal practice of weaving. So over the years, I've kept up with weaving. I'm showing you something that just came off of my loom. It's hand dyed with indigo, and you can see that even though this is a wide piece of cloth, it's kind of divided into these strips in areas. And one of the things that you're going to notice about West African weaving is it's largely strip-based weaving, very typically on two shafts, which we call the double-heddle loom, technically. So for a while, I was teaching weaving in St. Petersburg, Florida, kind of on the side. I had a little studio. But my day job is actually at Ringling College of Art and Design, and I teach there, and I'm also the Fulbright program administrator. So I'd like to think the Fulbright has come full circle kind of there. Now, I said that I would kind of contextualize us with different textiles in West Africa. So if you look over in Mali, there's a very famous textile, which hopefully some of you recognize. Colloquially, we call it mud cloth. This is Bogolan Fini. And I apologize, this is a very old photograph that was actually taken on film. I took it in 2004. And what's interesting about this is it's a plain weave cloth, and it's dyed with a mixture of mud, which has a high iron content and interacts with a dye that the cloth is already dyed in, of the Ngalama leaf. So it's this wonderful design that we see here. And something that I want to point out is if you see someone wearing Faso Dan Fani, for example, you know they're probably from Burkina Faso. If somebody's wearing mud cloth, you know they're probably from Mali or surrounding regions. Just like if you see someone wearing kente, you know that it comes from Ghana and surrounding regions, from the Akan peoples. And this example in particular comes from the Asante people. And a cloth like this actually has weft-faced patterns. So we see a range of different weaving styles in West Africa, from warp-faced to plain balanced weave, and then also to weft-faced textiles. And that's exactly what we're looking at when we get to Niger. This is an Arkilla Kunta in the collection of the British Museum. And you can see once again that this is a strip woven textile. but this is weft faced and there are weft float patterns on top of this. So this is very time intensive to weave. Now, we have some older photographs that show us how these textiles were woven. This is from the Picton and Mack book, and it shows us a German weaver at Niamey, Niger. And of course, he's weaving this complex weft float pattern. And you can see that he has two main shafts here. And then in the back, he's got two single shafts that he can pull up with his hand. And those are tied up so that that gives that weft float pattern here. So of course, this is the plain weave or the tabby, and then these are the float patterns here. And the type of textiles that can be made are wide ranging, but probably the most famous is called terra terra. And so this is a Zarma blanket, as we see here. And sometimes these can also be worn, but they're really wrapped up with identity, with Zarma identity. It is very important for cultural heritage. Now we can tell that this is a terra terra, not only because it has these weft float designs, but we also see that the composition of the cloth, there's this beautiful center panel, and I'm going to blow this up here so you can see this, and this is called the baba. And so this center panel here kind of determines that what we're looking at is a terra terra. Although what I must emphasize, we're going to see a range of different styles of Zarma weaving. So I was so excited when I was offered this opportunity to go to DIMA and to use my skills as a weaver to help train some master weavers on European style floor looms. And it was kind of funny because everything happened very fast and I'm like, I don't know about this. And I started looking around and I found Sumana in the news here. And you can see he's at Smithsonian Center for Folklife and Cultural Heritage, but also featured not once, but twice in with NPR talking about the DIMA school. So I knew this was really the real deal. So it was very exciting. And before I knew it, I was on a plane. And when I got there, this is what I saw. This is the weaving shed at DIMA. And you can see the young gentlemen who are training to become weavers right here. Now, when you're looking at this style of loom, you're going to notice that the warp extends far back from the actual loom itself. And it's secured because some people wonder, what is it tied onto? It's secured onto this sled, or at least I call it a sled here. You can see there's this type of metal dish, there's some rocks, and there's extra warp here. So this is what tensions it. You've got to put on just the right weight. And as they weave, they draw that in, and you can see that they can also extend it because there's more warp here. So this is at DIMA. This is in Burkina Faso. You can see just about anything can be used for a sled. This is a mortar, from a mortar and pestle for pounding grains that has lived its life and is now being recycled as a sled. So the first thing that I really wanted to do when I got to DIMA was to watch the students work, to take a look at this style of weaving because it's very different from what I worked with in Burkina Faso. And then I wanted to try my hand at it. So the master weaver who teaches at DIMA, Abdul Wahid Gumar, was trying to show me how to do this. And it was very interesting because even down to how you hold the shuttle and how you beat is very specific for this type of loom. So that allowed me to understand how the weavers that I would be training are used to handling their tools, which needs to be kind of different for a floor loom. So these are the type of textiles that are being woven in Niamey today. And you can see just how complex these weft face designs are. So I'm sure some of you want to see this in action. So this is, I'm going to show you a video and kind of talk over a little bit. This is Abdul Wahid Gumar, who is this master weaver. And you can see that he's already woven this weft face striped pattern, which I'm sure we know how that happens. And then he's putting in this patterned float right here. So you can see that he's, doubling up, almost quadrupling up the thread to make it thicker, make it stand out with the weft face. And then he has his two shafts here. that have the plain weave. And you see that he has this weaving sword behind the shafts. This is called Nzarma Afata. And this is what opens that supplemental shed for him to throw one pick of that black floating thread through. And then he's going to secure it with 2 throws of plain weave. Now, when he needs to change that shed for the fata, he just goes back and pulls up one of those single shafts right here. And those are not connected to anything. And you can put multiple different shafts on here. So one of the things I was thinking while looking at this is that's essentially 4 shafts. And I was really excited about that because in addition to the floor loom that DIMA already had, which was 2 shafts, I also shipped, and you can see this is the one that they already have here with a weaving area on the veranda. We also managed to ship, it was a group effort, several looms from my studio in St. Petersburg. So these are 2 Harrisville looms. This is a T8. This is an A4. It's an old direct tie-up, which is great for learning on. And then we have a little floor loom here, which I completely disassembled and put in my luggage. And so the next thing we set about was unpacking these, putting these back together, really examining the looms and how they functioned and their full capabilities. And we also put up these boards and I speak no Zarma, so this was very difficult for me. And many of the weavers spoke no French, primarily Zarma. So making our dictionary and then finally getting started to work. Now, everything happened so fast that when we shipped these looms, they already had projects on them. So my daughter was weaving a scarf out of very thick yarn. And I thought, let's just, finish that off and we'll thread everything. It will be great. And it was a lot of fun to play with. Now, the other thing that I had was a sectional warp that I had here on that has a thread that's 50% cotton and 50% wool, and it breaks really easily. And one of the struggles that weavers have in Niamey is finding high quality thread because you want thread that's really strong. And sometimes you do get that thread that breaks easily. So I thought that would be a fun thing to deal with. And then we very painstakingly tried to figure out how to communicate, how to thread. So you can hear I'm learning Zarma. There's lots of confusion. It's all very slow.
Okay.
Little by little. But eventually we got everything warped with our primary projects and we started weaving away. We also started weaving with this here. And everybody rotated and wove on different looms. And we had the master weaver who was teacher Abdul Wahid Gumar. We also had 3 master weavers from nearby village. This is Mumuni, he is one of those. And then we had 2 of the advanced weavers, Nadia and Samira, from the school who were weaving here. And you can see that we also started to look at how to read drafts and thinking about twills. Now, while we were doing that and weaving that off, we were also playing around with this 2-shaft Leesburg loom, which is pretty much a rug loom. And I got to thinking right next door, we have the tailoring department. And these are fashion posters that they had hanging up there, but they have tons of scraps of wax cloth, which is primarily made from cotton, on the floor. And so what we did is we went and we scooped up all of those strips that would go in the trash. We cut them up if we needed to, and we started to weave a rag rug because that cotton wax cloth can be quite absorbent and quite functional. And so really we were just playing around with this at first, and then the young women started weaving this off. And then the young women from the tailoring department sewed all the edges there, the salvages. And before you knew it, we were the next one that we wanted to weave. We started thinking about color theory. So we were also looking at color theory. We were also looking at, for example, I brought my iPad with Weave It software. So we were looking at different tie-ups and playing with that and colors, even if we weren't putting that on the loom. And so the young women really got to weaving these rugs, which were pretty interesting because they keep all of this material, out of the waste. So it's a great use for it. At the same time, after we took off our preliminary projects, it was time for the master weavers to really take over and start applying their style of weaving to these looms now that they knew how they functioned. So we can see here Mumuni is making a warp. This is a very short warp because we were just playing around and we wanted lots of opportunities for dressing the loom and quickly weaving off items with different threadings, et cetera, et cetera. And you can see that these are just holes in the ground and he's walking this back and forth. It's funny, I also brought a very large warping board and everybody looked at me like, no, why would we do this? This is so much easier. And it really is fabulous. So then they started putting their warp onto the looms now that they already knew how to do this. And it was wonderful to see them really blend some of those traditional techniques with these floor looms. One of the things that I came home from Burkina Faso with was the practice of combing through my warp. And I'll never forget my guild when I lived in Memphis. Everybody would go, oh, don't comb through your warp. Have you all heard that before? It's like the thing you do not do, right? Well, guess what? Here people comb through the warp. So if it works for you, go for it. And it works for them. And so it's this wonderful thing to see, of course, they're master weavers already, to see how they apply those life skills to this new tool set. So very quickly, we got everything dressed and we were off weaving again with even more things. And this time we were really examining twills. And we started playing around with some of these patterns for a number of reasons. Number one, twills are, they're easy to wear, right? They're very easy to wear. The other thing is that because of the structure of the weave, I thought it was a bit easier for us to approximate some of the traditional patterns that were showing up in the terra, especially when you get to these diamonds with these blocks in between them. And I realize this is a little bit difficult to see, but we really kind of approximated that. We also wanted to play around with different floats and different colors. So by the time we got to this place, this was pretty much at the end of 3 weeks. And I was just really impressed with how much we were doing. Now, when the school was closed after hours, we went and we did things. We talked about the school. I'll never forget one of the first Friday nights that I was there, I overheard people got invited to the radio station. And I said, I want to come, I want to hear it. And I thought it was going to be a quick 10-minute spot. So here we are at the radio station. It was 2 hours long and people were calling in and talking about Nigerian weaving and how important it is to have and how it's very difficult to find now because there are so few weavers. So they were thrilled about this. We also drove around and visited a whole bunch of different people. This is us in a car. And this is also Haruna Larabu, who's the Vice President of Outreach, and Mohamedou Tahiru, who's the Vice President of Student Affairs. And we went around and we visited people like the Bishop of Niamey, who's concerned with education and initiatives like this. And so that was a wonderful visit. We also visited the Minister of Culture, as you can see here, and we brought the different textiles that we had woven. And surprisingly, he really loved the rag rugs because it was keeping weight. I mean, I guess it's not surprisingly, but it was keeping waste, outside of, landfills and whatnot. So all of these efforts really combined to get us a lot of time in the news. We had several articles written about DIMA and what the weaving department was doing. You can see the news came kind of towards the end of my visit. And I loved seeing that for some of the younger children who were training, because I think it's a very impressive for them to see that weaving is valued And that's really important to see that their future profession is going to be valued and that people are interested in preserving this, this heritage, this cultural heritage. So before I knew it, our time was up. We had a final gathering. We took our final photographs. You can see all of the participants here in this weaving training, this formation. And before I knew it, I was back home, but I was getting photographs from Sumana of look what Mumuni wove on the loom, which was absolutely wonderful to see. And it's a little difficult to see in this, but this is a twill. And this is primarily warp faced, but there's this beautiful twill patterning in it. And what's amazing about that is this was actually ordered by a politician who you saw wearing this in that newscast. And you see him wearing a bubu that's sewn entirely from this cloth and bringing other members of the government to visit DIMA. And here's Sumana right here. So you see that this is very important, not just for the future of the youth to provide them with jobs, but it's also important nationally to have this textile that is wrapped up with identity and heritage and pride. So some of the things that have been woven more recently, we see these large traditional style weavings. And of course, folks are still weaving on the traditional style looms. But we can also see that folks, weavers like Mumuni, are really innovating in their own way on these floor looms. And that is absolutely amazing and incredible to see that happening, to see all of these tools at their disposal. All right, I am going to stop talking now and just say thank you so much, Nzarma Fonigwe. And just reiterate that this is really about, preserving weaving for the next generation. So I don't know, Judith, do you want to say something or?
I think we can just open up to questions.
Okay, I'm also going to pop this up here if you're interested in donating.
So let me start off with the first question, and I know some of the people attending will have some too. If you would write your questions in the chat, that will help me manage this question and answer period a little bit better. But I'm curious about who's buying the textiles. Are they being sold within the country? Are they being sold in Africa? Are they coming to the US? What's your market strategy?
Right now, the main outlet for these is as wedding gifts. It's traditional in Niger to buy one of the large blankets for the bride and for the groom. So it's sort of 2 per wedding. And that's the main use. We have a project going on right now to begin to develop other markets. So one of the things that Genevieve has started is to help them with the floor looms to do a lighter weight cloth that's more suitable for clothing. We have an initial interest with these men's robes, these bubus, and we're looking into other things, but we realize that we have kind of a dual responsibility. We are working to train a new generation, but also to keep this sustainable. We are actively working to develop markets.
Are older people weaving as well, or is it just young people?
It's older people. The issue is that it's been dying out. For example, when Sumana went to this village to recruit weavers, no one was actively weaving because there were no local customers, but they have the knowledge. The same way when the politicians came, the one politician who is the national deputy for an area called DIFA, he had not seen active weavers since the 1970s, but the knowledge is there. And so we're moving in with help from your development grant to begin to develop some weaving centers to get people going. And then we recognize that in order to revive it and to keep it alive, like I said before, we're going to need to develop markets, more markets than there are now.
So we won't be seeing things from DIMA for sale at the WARP annual meeting this year, I take it.
But next year for sure, we're going to be there.
All right. Very good. I have a question from Virginia Glenn. She says, considering the difference in the time it takes to warp a floor loom versus their traditional looms, overall, is it faster, or does it increase production for them to weave on floor looms? I mean, why would they choose a floor loom versus their traditional looms?
So, oh,
Again, and you can step in, Genevieve. I'm on a roll, so I'll talk, but you can go ahead after me. But our understanding was Sumana had come to visit me. He went to the weaving school. He got some magazines with the floor looms, took them to Niger, showed the master weavers. He said, yeah, I want a loom like this. And our understanding is the fact that you have more width, it increases productivity. And also the fact that you're up off the floor on a bench and positioned a little bit differently, it's easier on your body. So our sense is that the weavers are interested in moving to this technology for these reasons. And did you want to add something, Genevieve?
yeah, just essentially that it is faster, especially too, because it's a school. And so there are multiple weavers. And so when you have 3 people who are warping a loom, we can easily warp the 2 Harrisvilles, you know, pretty much in a day between the hours of 8 and 2 with everybody there. So, and they very quickly picked it up and are very fast, because remember, they've been threading through heddles that are made from thread that move around. So when you have that stiff heddle and you've got that hook, everything goes by very quickly. Yeah, so it speeds up the process. And just like Judith said, I mean, they weave day in and day out for hours, and this is very hard on your body. So we talked a lot about ergonomics, about getting up and walking around every so often. And that's very easy to do on a floor loom, because if you look at those traditional style looms, you kind of have to wedge yourself underneath and put your pedals in between your toes, and it's not as easy to walk away from your loom. So you tend to just kind of push through it. So there are advantages for them.
Okay, thank you. This is a question for Sumana.
Yes.
What brought you to the United States to live? Are you here for good, or are you going back?
Yeah, I'm here for good because I'm American citizen. So
And why did you decide to move to America?
first of all, before I moved to America, I live in Europe like 6 years. So because I want to get my first of all to get my family in better condition, because I want to send I have 2 daughters. One is living with me now, she's here. I have one in Africa. I want them to have good education, which the one I can afford if we stay in Niger, because the economy problem. So I just come here. To get a more opportunity, I got lucky. I met Juliet. I set up my workshop, leather work, what I was dreaming for a long time. So that's the reason why.
So do you continue to do leather work in your own studio, or do you primarily advise the people in Niger?
Yeah, I continue to do leather work here.
Oh, very good.
Yeah.
Okay, do we have other questions? Let me ask about the future. I understand that the grant you've received from WARP is going to help you expand to an additional location. Is that right?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
How many studios do you imagine you would have, let's say, 10 years from now?
We have a couple of possibilities. We're kind of pacing because we need to make sure that as we bring the weavers on, we have business for them. So we're doing a couple of things, but we have our weaving center in Niamey. We're going to start in Karibkina. Sumana has visited 2 other villages that are also interested. We suspect that there's a possibility that we could form a cooperative with maybe 50 people by the end of next year. At the same time, we are talking to various consultants who are experienced in working with artisans to develop export businesses. And we are doing some fundraising. When we get that together, we're going to spend a couple years working to really develop a business side. Plus, we want to develop as DIMA our capability to train artisans to do export business. So we're just going to keep going. I mean, as long as we can develop something that keeps weavers employed, brings them a good income, we'll just keep seeing where this heads.
So the weavers that you've trained and the leather workers that you've trained, do they continue to work at DIMA and produce products that you then sell, or do they go do they establish their own studios in their own homes and do that work? How does the what happens to those 100 people? Are they DIMA employees? Are they business partners? How are you organized?
Hate to say this, but it depends. What's happened is that we had started off with the tailoring and the leather working. And we graduated in 2021, we graduated 36 students. And then we went back and surveyed in February of 2022. The tailoring students have done a couple of things. They've all gone off and found employment. And that's in part because tailoring is very popular in Niger. If you can scrape together any money whatsoever, you have your clothes custom made. So there's always a demand for tailors. And we found that a couple of different things happened. Some of our students set up their own businesses. We had one young guy, even before he graduated, he had his own shop and he had 3 other people working for him. We have some of them who set up in their homes. We had some of them go to work for other people. And we had a case where 6 of our young women got together and formed their own cooperative to sew. The leather workers, there were 14 of them. They started working with the leather working instructor, formed their own cooperative. And to get them started, we allowed them to use our facilities to do their own work. They were bringing in orders. Eventually what happened is most of them got hired by a workshop that does a pretty big export business. So a whole group of them have gone to work there. A few of them have stayed on with the instructor. Mornings they work as teaching assistants. Afternoons they work with the instructor to do their own private commissions. The weavers were still early on. We had brought the school on for weavers in 2021. We have another year to go with our young students. And this is a year where we're getting ourselves organized, what we're going to do with them. We think right now that we're probably, we think there's market demand for the wedding blankets. So we're probably going to start by the end of next year, actively selling those and possibly forming a cooperative within DIMA, allowing them to use our equipment to do this business. But we are kind of in a planning stage with where we're headed with the weavers.
Oh, that's very helpful, Judith. I mean, it sounds smart business development. And one of the questions we have is related to that. Do you want more looms? And if someone has a loom to donate, are you able to pay for the shipping, or do you need that to be donated also?
It's a good question. We've just had a go around with that. So we're kind of thinking that we love to have looms. The problem is the shipping. We have an arrangement because of all things, you know, Harrisburg, Pennsylvania is one of the locations where a lot of Nigerian immigrants have settled in the US. And there's a specialized shipping service there that will ship by container to Niger. But typical floor size loom, it's going to cost about $500 to ship from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. And unfortunately, right now, we don't have the resources to pay for the shipping. So again, you know, we'd love a loom, but the catch is, how are we going to get it there? So again, we're very open to talking.
All right, well, who knows? There may be someone on this call today that has the secret to solve that problem, because it certainly is not unique to your program. So I'm glad
And
that came up.
Touches on another issue for us, that we're very aware that as we train these people, we also have to make sure that once we give them the skills, they also need the equipment to do the work. So we can't just train and then let them go without looms and so on. It's as an aside, we've started in January, we're working with a clinic that treats young women with obstetric fistula, and we've started a tailoring class for them. One of the things is that one group has donated enough money that when all these young women leave the clinic and go back to their villages, we'll be able to give everybody a sewing machine, so that not only have we taught them the tailoring skills, but when they go back, they'll actually have the equipment to make a living. So we try very hard to do this.
So you need looms and you need sewing machines, is that right?
If people are interested, yeah. We welcome any of that. We welcome any of that.
And they should contact you.
Yes.
If they have a donation of equipment of some sort, and you'll sort it out with them.
Absolutely. Again, one caveat, I have a friend here where I live who's known as the loom whisperer, and she's always looking at looms. And our situation is just that if you're interested in donating a loom, we're limited in what we can do. So the looms have to be in good working condition. We're just not equipped to do any renovations on looms. So that's just one caveat.
One of our members said there used to be a 4-shaft floor loom made in Ghana, northern Ghana. Are you aware of that? Yeah.
Yes. And there are typically 2-shaft looms that are made in Burkina Faso, the metal ones that you typically see. So they exist in other countries. Again, it's transporting them, and those looms don't function quite the same way as the wooden looms in terms of ergonomics. And many times, I'm not sure about the ones in Ghana, but the ones in Burkina Faso, the warp isn't rolled up on a bar. So you can't use that inside a studio space. You have to be outside and attached to a sled. So you still have that very long warp.
All right. Well, there's a lot of interest in that topic. So there's more chat. I think Kelsey is going to provide Judith's follow-up contact information in the email she sends us with the link to the video. And it's also in the chat right now, Judith's email. But if you'll also put that in the email, Kelsey, that would be great. I'm going to go on to a couple of other questions that we had. Diane was interested in asking Sumana about his leather work. How did you learn, and how did you get inspired to do this type of work?
Yeah, I was working leather. That's a long story.
Sumana, you have to start at the beginning when you were a little boy, because it's a good story.
Yeah, I'm going to start, to make sure. When I first started leather work, I have one little guy, by same age, 11 years old. He go to, his dad is director for a company for the leather worker. They call Santé de Métiers d'Art. It's for government. And when he come in the afternoon, we play soccer, he pay us snack every evening. I tell him, hey, his name is Kader. I said, Kader, where you get the money to pay us all the snack? He said, well, I'm working. I said, you working? Where do you work? He said, oh, I'm working my dad company, but that's where I get the money. I said, well, can you help me to get this work? He said, yeah, sure. And then I was there, I go there for apprentice, I spent like 7 years to be apprentice. So to get trained to become a master leather worker. So my I walk back and forth like 10 miles every day to go
Wow.
to go to workshop. 11 years old. But and that's the reason why I create DIMA, because I know people like me, they stay there and they need the hand to stand up. So leather worker give me everything. I've been travel all my life, in Africa, in Europe, France, Germany, Belgium, Holland, England, Ireland, United States here, Canada. So that's my life.
Fantastic. That is a great story.
Yeah.
And I think that'll take us to the last question. How long is the program for your students? How many years do they have to train in leatherwork or weaving before they can graduate?
It's one of the things that has been very important to Sumana, and we think it distinguishes our school, but he pushes that it be a quality training. So typically at our main center, we give 3 years of training, and we vary that. So depending on, some people come to us with specific needs. So for example, the young woman at the clinic, because of their situation, we're only going to do 9 months, but typically it's 3 months. We want to make sure that when they graduate, 3 years, sorry, thanks Sharon. But we want to make sure that they have some mastery of the craft. It's important so that they become desirable employees, that they can do their own work, that we have some leverage, because by the time they graduate, they're also capable of training other people. But Sumana really, really presses that these people, when they graduate, they have to know their stuff.
On that note, I want to thank all of our speakers for enlightening us about this wonderful program. I thank you especially to Sumana for starting it and keeping the dream alive, and for Genevieve and Judith for helping make it a reality and keep it going. I want to also thank all of you for attending. It's been great to have you. You ask wonderful questions, and it's good to see your smiling faces.